Hello everyone, Michael here, and today is a special day. It's Tuesday, November 30th, 2021, and that means it is the official release date of Dark Choice, the 7th novel in my Lance Brody supernatural suspense series. And I am super excited for you guys to get your hands on this book and find out what happens next. When Dark Holiday, which was the 6th novel, came out back in February, it ended on a pretty big cliffhanger, and I got messages and Facebook posts and comments and emails from you guys basically all for the rest of the year asking if that was the last book, when the next book was going to be coming out, what's going to happen to Lance, what's going to happen to Leah. There were so many questions, and I promise you they are all going to get answered in Dark Choice. So really excited for you guys to get a hold of this book and to read it and to find out what happens next. But to celebrate the release, I thought I would do something special over here on my YouTube channel. So I'm actually going to read to you guys the very first chapter of Dark Choice right now. But just as a side note before we get started, there is a prologue at the beginning of Dark Choice that kind of sheds a little bit of backstory on a location that is used later in the book, but I'm not going to read that. I don't want to spoil anything for you guys. We're going to jump right into chapter 1, which picks us up with Lance just hours after the end of Dark Holiday. So, enjoy. Dark Choice, Lance Brody Book 7, by Michael Robertson Jr. Chapter 1. Lance Brody said nothing. In the driver's seat, the surfer cruised the Plymouth Horizon along the highway with one hand on the wheel, and the thing called Patrick Kane rode shotgun. The Reverend sat tall and straight in the back seat next to Lance, like a dutiful partitioner, attending Sunday service. Every so often he would close his eyes and his chin would tilt down and he would doze off, looking like he'd suddenly decided to fall into silent prayer. The four of them, 3 hunters and their prey, had ridden silently in the too-cramped car all through the night, as if the events that had led them to this moment together had drained them, and now that the adrenaline had faded, they were left in a state of muted recovery and contemplation. It was only when Patrick pointed to a highway exit sign just as the sun was cresting the horizon and the surfer had obediently driven the car off the ramp and into the parking lot of a fast food restaurant that the first words were spoken. "Pit stop, boys," Patrick said, sparking to life, like the four of them were a group of college roomies on a spring break road trip. "Time to piss and fuel up." He turned in the seat, his leather jacket making a sucking sound as it pulled free from the upholstery, and through a menacing grin he looked at Lance. "Our sun-bleached friend over here," he jerked a thumb toward the surfer, "will take you to the men's room so you can do whatever. Nothing funny, okay? I think we can all agree we're past that. You made your choice." He laughed, and a bit of spit flew from his mouth. Lance stared at the boy, who really wasn't a boy at all, gave him no reaction, zero emotion. "I'm going to grab us some food," Patrick said. "We can eat on the road." Patrick nodded to the surfer and then turned and grabbed the door handle to get out. "Coffee," Lance said, his voice flat and groggy. "What's that, friend?" Patrick turned back around, that menacing grin even larger. Lance cleared his throat. "Get me a large coffee. Black." He didn't wait for an answer or any response at all. Lance opened the back door and unfolded his long legs out of the Plymouth and stretched his back. He walked straight into the restaurant without waiting to see if the surfer was following. It didn't matter. He wasn't going to do anything stupid. Wasn't going to try to run out the other side of the building or start shouting for help. It would do no good. Nobody could help him. He wasn't even sure he could help himself. His ancient flip phone was in his pocket, but the battery was long dead, and its charger had been left behind along with Lance's backpack. Besides, there was no number on earth he could call to make things any better. Because whatever evil was inside the boy named Patrick Kane had been right. Lance had made his choice, or more specifically, it felt as though the universe had led him to it, had been guiding him every step of the way, putting people and things into motion until all the pieces were in alignment and it was time for my purpose, Lance thought, feeling the certainty of it all, the weight of realization that had fallen on him just last night in Paul and Brienne Mickey's living room. The time had come, and something big was coming with it. But as usual, Lance had no idea what. Some things never change. The universe always seemed to have a card up its sleeve. All Lance knew now was that whatever it was, whatever was coming, it felt definitive. It felt final. One side would win, the other would lose. Lance was trying not to focus on those implications, on what scale the damage might be measured. He was standing at the urinal when the door opened behind him and the rubber slap, slap of the surfer's flip-flops announced his arrival. Lance flushed and washed his hands and left without even acknowledging him. The surfer followed him out, silently stalking, through the restaurant and back to the car, where the two of them took their seats again. Patrick and the Reverend came out several minutes later, their hands full of bags and cups. The Reverend got into the back seat and handed Lance his coffee and one of the bags, which was full of breakfast sandwiches. Lance took 2 biscuits from the bag and handed it back, had one nearly gone before the surfer had the car out of the parking lot. They were 2 hours down the road when Lance finally felt sleep coming over him. Despite the food and the large coffee, which he'd nursed as long as he could before gulping down the last quarter of it, the fact was Lance had forced himself to stay awake through the night and now his body was shutting down. He felt his eyes slide closed and his head leaned over against the window and the slightly off-rhythm hum of the tires on the asphalt began to lull him to sleep. He felt his mind begin to relax, to drift off, to open up and... "Lance!" Leah's voice, blasting through his head like a megaphone. "Lance, tell me where you are!" Lance bolted upright, suddenly wide awake again, but he wasn't the only one who'd noticed. "Stop!" Patrick Kane shouted, and the surfer slammed on the Plymouth's brakes hard enough that the tires screeched and the cars blared their horns and swerved around them, narrowly avoiding an accident while the surfer brought them to a complete stop on the shoulder of the road. Patrick glared at Lance, the evil in his eyes like black orbs swallowing all the light around them. "No," he hissed. "Shut her out, Lance. Cut her off." Lance stared back, silent, processing the idea that Patrick had heard Leah too, or maybe he felt her. "I was serious when I said I was doing you a favor before, by letting her live," Patrick said. "Don't you see that? I could have killed her and still gotten what I wanted. Don't make me change my mind, Lance. There are others like them." He pointed to the Reverend and the surfer. "All I have to do is say the word and they'll track down your little girlfriend and make her wish she'd never met you." He smiled that ugly, toothy smile again and said, "I don't really need to go into more detail, do I? You can work it out for yourself." Lance could. The car was silent for a full minute. Patrick stared at Lance and Lance stared right back. On the highway, cars flew by in blurs of color and bursts of noise. Finally, Lance nodded once. He closed his eyes, reached out into the wavelengths and found that connection between Leah and him, the one that had only recently grown to its full strength, surprising them both. He sent his message. "Stay away. Don't come for me." Then, because he could think of no other fitting send-off, he spoke the truest thing he could find. "I love you." Then he closed the iron gates of his mind, shutting out the world and others beyond. With the connection severed, Patrick must have been satisfied, because he nodded once to the surfer and then they were moving again. Lance felt terrible, hated himself for what he'd done, but he also took solace in something he'd learned. The way Patrick had reacted when Leah had reached out to Lance, it had been more than just anger. Lance Brody had spent a lifetime becoming very adept at reading people, and even though the thing called Patrick Kane was not entirely human, it was forced to communicate through human speech and emotions. Lance had seen panic along with that anger, and in Lance's experience, panic bordered on fear. "They're afraid of her," Lance thought and smiled. "She's dangerous to them." He took this thought with him and held it tight as he once again attempted to get some sleep. The universe was still dealing the cards, and Lance would have to make his bet and play his hand when the time came. Until then, all he could do was wait. But the wait would be excruciating, because today brought with it a feeling that he'd been working hard to forget, the feeling he'd experienced the day the Reverend and the surfer had killed his mother and Lance had fled his hometown. It was like drowning, only not in water but loneliness. Now he'd lost Leah, the one person who had helped fill that emptiness inside him, the one who'd made him feel as though he didn't have to walk through this world alone. Only this time, there were differences, the biggest of which being that Leah was still alive. And she was strong. Stronger than even Lance had thought possible. "They're afraid of her," Lance thought again, just as he slipped into sleep. "This isn't over yet." So there you have it, guys. That is chapter 1 of Dark Choice, the 7th book in my Lance Brody series. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. The book is available for sale starting today on Amazon. It's available in ebook, paperback, and as part of your Kindle Unlimited subscription. The audiobook will be coming down the road, probably first quarter of 2022. I will definitely make an announcement when I know that is going to be releasing. So be sure and follow me on my social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you want to follow me, or sign up for my newsletter with the link down below. You do actually get a free ebook and a free audiobook when you sign up for the first time, so that's cool. And whether this is the book that you've been waiting for since February with Dark Holiday, or whether this first chapter maybe has got you interested in the Lance series for the first time and you're going to go back and start at book 1, either way, I really hope you enjoy reading. Thanks so much for supporting my work, and I will talk to you later.